We'll resume, please.
Thank you. So then we're going to look at...
Sorry, sir, can I just think on the last note you may have made before we broke? I think I said that my response on the motorway forming a boundary was in paragraph 2.38. I think I said my main proof. I did mean my rebuttal proof. I apologise if I just correct your note of that. Sorry about that.
Thank you. We were going to move on then, Mr. Simpson, to look at the question of densely populated or not.
Yes.
You've got some information in your rebuttal proof, Appendix B, is that right?
Yes, yes. Paragraph 3.15 of my rebuttal proof, and then Appendix B, which is the information, the comparable information between the Southall site and the Barton site, the correct site.
And so page 31 of your rebuttal proof.
Yes.
And that has the table for us, and you've provided the figures based on the information in your Appendix B, which has the maps for Southall and the map for this facility. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
And in summary, we can see what the populations are from the table within 500 metres north for the appeal proposal, 6,200 for Blue NG, 1 kilometre of the site, 3,400 here, and 27,700,
yes,
and so on. What's your view, having seen what the raw material provides?
Yes, I'd start, I think, from... I think I'm correct on saying that Mrs. Harding referred to the Incinerator as being suburban. I wouldn't disagree with that, but I would say that does suggest a sort of medium density of housing rather than a high density of housing. I think that is true of most of the surrounding area to the south and west. But when we look at whether it is densely populated, I accept that all these things are relative. But if you look at the plans in my Appendix B first, you can see that the context of the site within that, the 500, the 1 kilometre and the 2 kilometre circles are very, very different. A simple look at the plan tells you that very starkly that they are very significantly different in terms of the density of the residential development and therefore the likely numbers of people who are living within those distances of the site. I've summarised the figures that you've seen, sir, are figures generated by the mapping phone model based on those, what we would normally call catchment area or drive time, sorry, 500 metres and 1 kilometre diameter, sorry, radius, not diameter, circle. I've summarised those figures in my paragraph 3.15, and I've drawn out the differences. You can see that within 500 metres of the site, clearly there is very substantial difference because we've got no people living in respect to the part of the site, or 6,000. And it depends what you mean by nearby, I suppose. So what I've just done in addition to that, if you take, and this is a simple matter of subtraction, if you look at the zone between 500 and 1,000 metres, the Ernston catchment, if we can use that term, would have a population of 3,451, compared to the Southall catchment of 21,574. I think that's a very, very stark contrast. And then if we were to look at the zone between 1 kilometre and 2 kilometres, Ernston has a population of 24,254, and Southall has a population of 38,274. Hopefully you can follow the calculation I've done.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, you can simply compare by looking at the table in my paragraph on page 31 of my rebuttal, that within that 2 kilometre we're looking at a population sorry, if we look at the 2 kilometre, the population in Urmston is 27,000, which compares very closely to the 27,000 which live in 1 kilometre. And that's quite a significantly larger area in terms of the difference between 1 kilometre zone and a 2 kilometre zone. So that shows that the population is substantially different in terms of its density and substantially less in respect to the Barton site. So on that basis, I would say that leads to the conclusion that the area surrounding the site is not densely populated, certainly not by comparison to this urban location in Southall.
We're here dealing with a comparison between this location and the Blue NG location.
We are, yes.
This might be a convenient point just to deal with other points of distinction that you, from your point of view, might want to draw to inspectors' attention between this proposal and the Blue NG proposal that you think are material. We've dealt with some already, but it would be helpful to have your view, please.
Yes, I think I've looked at both sites, and I've looked at the decision on Blue NG and extracted from that decision letter all the information I think is relevant. And it seems to me that there are more differences than there are similarities. And in respect to our point, which has already been said this morning, the whole of the borough in Ealing is an AQA. And by definition, as we've just seen, therefore all of the residents in that borough, living in that borough, are affected by the exceedances.
They're all of Ealing.
All of Ealing.
Borough of Ealing.
Yes, borough of Ealing, sir. And as we've seen, there is a substantially greater number in terms of the population that will likely be affected because of the different densities that we've just been looking at. So the potential or the fact of residents being affected by air quality issues is very different in my view. So it is very densely populated, and I don't, as I just said, I don't accept that this locality is to the same extent by any stretch of the imagination. There's also a very different population profile in respect of the 2 areas. We've already seen the evidence in Mrs. Harding's proof, and she's accepted that what that shows generally is that the area within Barton, within Urmston and Davyhulme, Clifton generally is doing very well when you compare it to the various deprivation indices. You'll see in the my appendix C to my rebuttal, I set out the profile for Southall as extracted from the Ealing core strategy, and that gives an indication of the issues within the Southall area and the levels of deprivation that exist there. And I would suggest to you that's a very different picture. I'm happy for you to look at that and come to your own conclusion. But it's useful, I think, also just to look at the population data which is in my appendix. Appendix B, the tables we've just looked at the plan, but if you look at the population profile information that goes with that, and we can pull out any one of those, one of the things that I would just point as a significant difference. If you look at the Barton catchment 1 kilometre, and to help you, sir, if you start at the Barton, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you go to page 6, you should see an ethnic group breakdown. So this is a breakdown of the population in that catchment by ethnic grouping. And you can see that within the Barton, the 98% of the resident population are classed as being white. That's, again, I think reflected what I understand the area to be. If you look at the equivalent table for the 1 kilometre in the Southall, you go to the plan of Southall, again it's 1, 2, 3, 4, the 7th page in. You'll see that in Southall we have a very different position where just under 14% of the population in that 1 kilometre zone are white, and 64.5% are described as coming from Indian, Pakistani or Bangladeshi origin. Now I make no point about the ethnic status, but I think it is true to say that, certainly my experience of working in Salford and working in Derby City Council before that, is that where you have high numbers of particularly Asian, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi population, that tends to lead to much larger households. The family numbers tend to be greater, and therefore the housing is totally different. They're still, certainly in Derby and Salford, living in terraced housing by and large, but there are large numbers of people living in the same size housing, so that the problems of overcrowding are much more significant. And there are also different health issues often in those ethnic groups. So again, I think those profiles, that's just an example, sir, but I think the profiles are really quite different.
And that I think that's you referred to your Appendix C, but worth perhaps just in the context of what you've said, looking at the first paragraph of the Southall profile.
Yes, sorry, yes.
And the inspector knows what the Ernst one says, because we've been through it previously. This is indicating what the context is. Most ethnically diverse in the borough, famous for its Asian culture, largest Asian shopping centre in the capital, continues to be home to new communities, more recent migrants from Somalia, Middle Eastern Europe. The area is characterised by a relatively youthful population, lower rates of economic activity, higher levels of overcrowded households, and that's something you've just referred to, and parts of the neighbourhood have high relative levels of multiple deprivation. Southall area includes 3 designated conservation areas and so on.
Yeah.
That's rather perhaps reflecting what you've indicated. Thank you.
So that deals with the population profile. As we've already seen, there appears to be no advice available to the inspector in that inquiry from the HPA or from the local health authority. But there was lots of evidence put in front of the inspector that there were very poor health conditions within the population, in the community. And there are references, I don't need to go to all this, but if you look at the inspector's report, there are references, for example, to life expectancy being 10 years less than the average, and that's at paragraph 7.13. There's certainly no evidence in front of you here that we have the same level of issues with respect to life expectancy. There was evidence from the Mayor's Air Quality Strategy report about accelerated deaths from pollution at 6.2.16. As has been made reference to before, the 3 neighbouring wards to the site were described as being amongst the most deprived in the country. I've not gone back to the evidence, sorry, that's at paragraph 6.2.17 in the decision report. I've not been back to the evidence, but I take that as being that those wards are within the worst 10% in the country. That's what is mostly referred to when that term is used. But those are wards. This is not the situation in Trafford, where we've seen, as I said, a generally good level of performance against the deprivation measures. And certainly the 3 wards that Mrs Harding has looked at come out very favourably on all of those in the cities. And the only part that doesn't perform at that level is one super lower output area, which actually is in the worst 20%. So again, I think those conditions are very different in terms of context. Clearly, we've already seen that the air quality issues in Southall are significant, but I know that they're affected both by a very congested highway network. I've not tried to drive in London very often, but when I have, it's not been a case of speeding along. It's generally, in my experience, being congested at all times of day. And that is different again to the situation here. But also I know that the air conditions are affected by a busy railway, which has got diesel engines, which again are all completely outside of the control of the local authority, and that's in paragraph 6.2.7. And again, so my experience of the suburban rail service in London is that the frequency of trains is significantly greater than we experience here in the northwest. Of course, we don't even have a railway line close to the site. So you can see that the challenge of achieving air quality objectives might be very different in Ealing than it is here. And the other point that I picked out from that is that, of course, it was the application, the reason to refusal, as Mr. Oaken said this morning, it wasn't actually refused, but the council resolved that they would have refused it on air quality impacts or actual harm on air quality, but also on highway access ground because of the unsuitability of the access. And you'll see from the report, for example, that paragraphs 5.2 and 7.10, that the delivery lorries bringing fuel to the site would have had to use very congested roads, including residential roads with residents parking on in some cases, with relatively narrow usable carriageways, and the appeal was dismissed partly on the basis that it would constrain the free flow of traffic. And again, you can see that that would be a very significant factor in terms of looking at the impact of emissions. So I think there are very substantial differences between the two locations, and therefore I wouldn't regard Blue MG as being a decision which should influence your conclusions in this case.
Thank you. Can we just then deal briefly with the need for regeneration and the vulnerability in that context of
yes.
The surrounding area? We've had evidence from Mrs. Harding. What's your view now, having heard that evidence and her answers in cross-examination?
I think it supports the conclusion I came to in my rebuttal evidence. So is that the various data sets which Mrs. Harding has included in her proof actually demonstrate that the area is performing relatively well, and that would support the conclusion that officers came to when they prepared the court strategy, that none of these areas warranted a designation either as a regeneration area or a priority area for regeneration. In respect to the town centre, again, Mrs. Harding has agreed that that benefited from considerable investment. The regeneration scheme has been a considerable success. I think she used the term bucking the trend. And that is, I would submit to you, is a really quite significant demonstration of confidence in the area, given the general picture with regard to retail and town centre developments across the country. So my experience and my practice and experience across the work that we do out of our 10 offices is that town centre development has pretty well ground to a halt over the last 4 to 5 years. So to see a development which has not only been implemented but has been very successfully implemented and has secured occupation by some very good quality national multiple retailers is really a very substantial demonstration of investor confidence and occupier confidence, and that's what I would want you to conclude from that. Equally, sir, in respect of Woods End Circle, I think most local authorities, certainly across the northwest and the ones that I've dealt with, would be absolutely delighted to get a positive submission from 8 developers when they market a rundown shopping parade in what I understand to be a largely public sector housing area. Again, that's my experience is that local authorities would generally struggle to get any kind of developer interest. So again, I think that's a demonstration of confidence. We've already seen the evidence from Mr. Hetherington's report about the confidence and the Persimmon Home schemes that we talked about. I think all of that actually demonstrates that the area is doing relatively well, that there isn't any particular vulnerability in this area to the external factors that Mrs. Harding seeks to argue would be at risk of putting this area in prejudice of continued improvement. I really don't see any basis for that at all. In fact, I would say that all the evidence points to a contrary conclusion, that the area is improving, has improved, and is very robust in terms of its lack of vulnerability.
Thank you. We've then had some discussion, and I think it was Dr. Holman, who raised the issue, as to the extent to which some of the developments referred to, particularly those in section 5 of your main proof, could be described as footloose. This arose because we were pointing out that here was the council complaining about a negligible increase in terms of nitrogen dioxide, but having granted planning permission for developments which had very much more significant impacts.
Yes.
You recollect the point?
Yes.
What is the position, please, in relation to the developments that you've referred to in your proof as to whether or not they should be regarded as footloose?
Yeah, these are dealt with at section 5 in my proof, sir, and I'll just go through the list as they appear in that section. The first one is the wastewater treatment works, and the scheme that we've just looked at actually in Appendix 1 to the expansion of that facility. The point I've made in evidence is that those works are not part of, and I don't understand to be any part of, an ongoing strategy of mitigation to remove or reduce the past odour problems which various witnesses have spoken about. That's not my understanding at all. So they're not being done in order to bring the site into compliance with modern environmental standards. The proposal is a proposal for the expansion. And you can see that if you look at Appendix 1 again and you look at the planning statement which we've included, which was submitted with that application, it talks about it being a proposal to improve the capacity or increase the capacity of the site. So I'm sure there are advantages to it being located on the existing wastewater treatment site. I'm sure there are significant business benefits to United Utilities in developing it in this location as part of that overall site. But I can't see anything in their report that says that this is the only place that we could locate it. And certainly when you look at the committee report that officers submitted in respect to that scheme, there isn't even a hint that was a consideration which officers had to the front of their mind. And that, well, this isn't very good, it's going to have air quality impacts, but it's got to be here, so it's okay. There is nothing at that sense in the committee report at all that I can see. When we look at Port Salford, that is a strategic, it's a trimodal interchange facility, sir, which is taking advantage of the location because it can provide access to the ship canal, to the railway network, the freight rail, and to the main highway. Clearly that's a good reason for having it in this location, but I can't say, but I don't know the detail whether that could have been achieved somewhere else along the ship canal. The ship canal is a very long feature, 36 miles long, I think. So that's one that may well have needed to be here, but it could possibly have been somewhere else. Trafford Quays, I dealt with this myself, both through promoting it in the core strategy and also in terms of the applications that are being promoted. Well, clearly, sir, that's a residential and office development. There is no specific reason why it needs to be located there. But having said that, it is fully in accordance with the Council's core strategy. It's in the Trafford Centre rectangle, which the core strategy designates as a strategic location, and therefore is expected to make a major contribution to the Council's housing and employment land requirements in the period of the plan, which goes to 2026. And indeed, in that core strategy, strategic location policy, Trafford Quays is expressly identified as making a significant contribution to residential, with a figure of 1,060, I think it is, dwellings expected to be developed on that site within the planned period. So it's not just a case of granting permission, it's also being positively promoted by the Council as a significant area of development. And you'll be aware, sir, of course, that the core strategy is accompanied by an infrastructure plan, and that has been assessed by the inspector who carried out the examination to be sound in terms of its deliverability. The same applies to the office development at Junction 10. Again, those offices could obviously be developed elsewhere, but that is in line again with the core strategy strategic locations. The food store at Trafford Retail Park isn't in the strategic location, so it doesn't have any particular designation in the core strategy. And clearly a food store could have been in any number of locations. There's no express reason why a food store would have to be located on an existing retail park. It is in fact not on the existing retail park, it's an expansion of the retail park. So again, I would say that is footloose. So there are very few of those really that you know, I would say are not footloose in that general sense. The one that's not covered in my summary in section 5 that has been referred to, I think particularly by Dr. Holman, was the coal bed methane extraction.
And that actually put forward on the basis that minerals can only be worked where they lie,
yes.
And therefore you're stuck with it in this area.
Well, that's certainly true of minerals, and certainly the minerals I've been involved with in the past, that's certainly been true, and it's clearly a point you would always make in support of an application. But that's not my understanding of coal bed methane. I haven't dealt with one, but my understanding is that methane is a gas and it migrates through the ground along coal seams. And therefore, it shouldn't be treated in that sense, or it doesn't need to be treated as a standard mineral that can only work where it is found. And indeed, access to that methane resource could have been achieved at a number of different locations. I've discussed that with Peel, and Mr. England in Peel Energy has had a discussion with his colleagues in Peel's mineral team, and they have confirmed that is the case.
Right, thank you. Then just a few matters about compliance with government policy and the development plan. Clearly, the Inspector knows what Mrs. Harding has said about compliance
yes.
with the development plan policies, but and we know that there was only one now defunct policy and reason for refusal. But what's your overall view, please, with regard to the development plan, bearing in mind the evidence that we've now had from Mrs. Harding and references to policy, and the position, of course, we've got recorded in the Statement of Common Ground?
Yes, sir. I've done my own sort of assessment based on the notes I've taken during the evidence in chief and cross-examination. And I don't intend to go through that because it's very detailed, but my overall conclusion from that is that there does not appear to be any specific conflict with any development plan or government policy identified by the Council's witnesses. Certainly we have been told that Reason 1 only refers and relies on a policy which is now defunct, D5, so there's no policy basis for that. We've certainly been told in clear terms by Mr. Watson that Reason 2 does not rely upon any policy and therefore does not assert any conflict with any relevant policy. So that's my conclusion. No doubt Mr. Fraser will take me to areas where he thinks that's not correct, but that does seem to be the position. What I would draw from that, though, I'll just make one point about the national policy statement. I think Mrs. Harding agrees that it is material, and that's quite right and clearly right because it says so in its own text of paragraph 1.2.1. And I think she accepted the material and she accepted that it should be given some weight, but I would say it needs to be given very significant weight because we go back to the point that this is first and foremost an energy proposal, and therefore it should be treated in that way. And as we've seen in the way that the council officers advise the committee, greater weight should be given to policies concerned with energy and renewable energy supply and delivery than to the waste policies. So I would make that my point.
That applies to EN1 and the EN3.
EN1 and the EN3. And that's significant also, sir, because of the locational criteria, the site suitability criteria which appear in EN3 in respect of an energy proposal, and I say we meet those full square. But we have gone on to address, as GMGU required us to do, the waste policy and policy 10 as well. So I say we satisfy both, but you should give greater weight to the energy policies in consideration of the appeal. But I think where we end up is that there's certainly no doubt that both Mr Watson and Mrs Harding accept that the proposals are in compliance with the whole raft of government and development plan policy and strategy with regard to the development of renewable energy generation capacity and the meeting targets of such provision. That's got to be right, but I say that we are not only in compliance, but we derive substantial support from those policies, and that's all set out in my main proof. So I don't intend to take you through. You can see the clear sections in my main proof. But I would point to the reference, particularly in the National Policy Statement, that there is an urgent need for such facilities to be built, and say to you that we assist in achieving those objectives. As we've seen, the proposals also comply with the waste strategy and the relevant waste policies at the national and local level. Given that position, and given that neither of the witnesses on the council side can identify any conflict with any development plan policy as a whole, we go back to the planning balance. With respect to Mrs Harding, she doesn't seem to have addressed this at all. The starting position is the development plan. We are in a position, I submit to you, that we are in full accord with the development plan. If we apply the approach in the framework, that would suggest that we should be granted permission without delay. And the only thing that would counter that view is, are there other material considerations which would weigh against that conclusion? Because I don't think that we have had any evidence put before the inquiry which demonstrates that there are material considerations which would outweigh the very, very substantial compliance policy at all levels.
And that position with regard to compliance with policy at all levels, just looking at the Council's statement of case, paragraph 4.4 tells us, only a short paragraph, it turns out that it tells us that the LPA will also argue that the weight to be given to the above material considerations is substantial, sufficient to override the appeal proposal's general compliance with a number of government and development plan policies. So the position taken from the statement of case, not conflict with national policy and development plan policies, but other material considerations.
That's correct, and I think that's also repeated in the reason for refusal. But of course, the reason for refusal didn't have regard even to the emerging policy, which was very shortly to be adopted at the time that the notice was issued.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Singleton. Thank you, sir. That's all, Chief.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fraser. Do you want to make a start now?
I'm happy to make it. Yeah, I'm happy to make a start.
Okay, that's fine.
Afternoon, Mr. Singleton.
Afternoon.
Mr. Singleton, can I just understand? Let me just move this bit nearer.
Yes.
Can I just understand your position? It seemed to be the case that you were telling us early on in your examination, Chief, that the core strategy was up to date and based on an up to date evidence base.
Yes, it says so in its own text, and I don't disagree with that.
Well, I know it says so, but the way you were giving your evidence, I thought you were endorsing that and agreeing with it.
Well, I do endorse that. You can be certain I didn't agree with everything at the examination, but in general, yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, and indeed you told us there were tons, that wasn't your word, but lots of...
substantial.
Yeah, lots of evidence to support it, is what you said. Now, if we just turn to the statement of common ground first, please. And we turn to Appendix 4.
Yes, again, I only have a black and white copy of this, but I think
probably for these purposes
yep.
that will do. We can see on the statement of common ground that the site boundary, in the colour it's set out in red, but I think it'd be black in yours effectively.
Yes.
And obviously that's agreed between us, and I certainly don't understand you to be suggesting that it's incorrect in any material terms.
I'm afraid I'm losing you.
Sorry, I don't understand you to be suggesting the site boundary which we see set out in the statement of common ground is incorrect in any material terms. I'm sure if you got a surveyor out with you the other light, you might just be able to sort of argue about precisely where it is, but it gives us a good indication.
I assume it's copied from the red line plan, so I hope it's right.
Thank you very much. And we can obviously see the location of the M60 on that plan also.
Yes.
And so we can see that the appeal site occupies land on both sides of the M60. I suppose you could say it straddles the M60 if that's the way you want to describe it, but it occupies land on both sides.
The access road goes underneath the M60. I think that's the best way to...
Well, you can describe it as the access road if you want. It is the application site, as we can see, the site boundary, yes. And the site occupies land on both sides of the M60.
Yes.
Okay. Now, can we turn to the core strategy, please, which I think is CD62.
Can I put this one away?
You can. And this afternoon you took us, amongst other places, I think, to page 10 of the core strategy, which is figure 1, which shows us the different spatial areas.
Yes.
And I think you acknowledged that that was diagrammatic, effectively, that plan.
Yes.
Although I think you said less diagrammatic for Trafford Park than for Urmston.
That certainly seems to be the conclusion. Well, it is a conclusion I draw from that plan, yes.
Right, okay. And I think what you were saying was the Trafford Park, you think, went up to the eastern side of the M60?
Yes.
Okay. What you didn't, I think, take us to specifically, although you made passing reference to it, is the spatial profile for Urmston, which we see, I think, set out on page 15.
No.
Well, I think we do see it at page 15.
Oh, we do see it. No, I didn't go to it. You've already been to it.
That's right. And I don't understand you to express any disagreement with what's said in the spatial profile on page 15.
No, I think it's an accurate reflection of Urmston in its general character. Yes.
Thank you very much. And will, of course, have been evidence-based, as we've seen from what you've just been saying before.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. And we can see, actually, in the first paragraph, it tells us the area that it's talking about, doesn't it? It says
yes, it does.
Yes. It says the Urmston area is made up of a number of distinct residential neighbourhoods, including Flixton, Davyhulme, Woods End and Urmston itself. The area is bounded by the M60, the Manchester Ship Canal and the Mersey Valley. It's traversed by the Manchester to Liverpool railway line. Now, insofar as it's bounded by the M60, that's going to be on the eastern side of Urmston. It's bounded by the M60, isn't it?
Yes.
And obviously, the northern and western sides, or the northwestern, because of this sort of shape of it, perhaps the way I'm describing it, is the Manchester Ship Canal boundary.
Yes, the Ship Canal is both the area boundary and the borough boundary.
Well, it is actually. You're right. You're right. Yes. And then the Mersey Valley, and we can see that I think there's a spatial profile for the Mersey Valley elsewhere, but the Mersey Valley is basically on the sort of southern side of the...
Yeah, the Mersey Valley, just to help the inspector, it is a significant river corridor passing through the middle of the borough. It does effectively divide the borough into its north and south sections. and it's a very broad river valley in locations, very green, and part of it is green belt.
Yeah, and we can see if we just flick back to page 10, it has its own spatial.
Yes.
It does have its own spatial
Yeah.
profile, and as I indicated, it is essentially to the south.
It's taken generally as being the divide between the north and south.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much. So certainly in the description of the profile, it seems to be including the land between the M60, the Ship Canal, and the Mersey Valley as Elmston, as it's describing it, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, that you can draw that conclusion, but of course this is a 4-paragraph description of a very large area. And yes, it is generally true, and I think I said in my evidence in chief that the boundary of the area is the motorway for most of the Elmston area. My point is that it is not an effective boundary in relation to this particular part of the area.
Yeah.
That's the distinction I draw.
Yes, and indeed you did say, spare with me a moment, you did say that you didn't consider the waste treatment works to be part of the Elmston area, didn't
Well,
you?
I think that's agreed between parties, because it's agreed that it doesn't fit within this profile area. If it's agreed that it doesn't fit within the profile area, it sits in between. Then the logic
waste
is that
treatment
it's not
waterworks.
actually captured by this profile description either.
The waste treatment waterworks.
Yes.
Let's just look at the 6th paragraph of the spatial profile.
Yes.
What does it tell us that Elmston is home to?
Again, but it's a general description. It is home to 2 strategic facilities.
Which are?
But it's in the ward of Elmston, I accept that, and it's within the general area. But as we've said before, the site itself, which is bounded and enclosed by the wastewater treatment system, sits between these 2 profile areas. It doesn't fit within this profile.
Which are the 2 strategic facilities?
Well, the facilities that are referenced here are the wastewater treatment works and the hospital.
So the spatial profile tells us it's bounded by the motorway and the Ship Canal.
Yes.
And that it is home to, amongst other things, the waste treatment waterworks. But you're still saying, are you, that the waste treatment waterworks do not form part of this Elmston spatial profile?
That is my position, and I think that position is agreed both by Mrs. Harding and it's also agreed in the Statement of Common Ground.
Well, I think you have to be careful about what's agreed, Mr. Singleton, because if we go back to the Statement of Common Ground and we look at the plan, it is quite plain, as we have already agreed, that the appeal site straddles the 2 areas, doesn't it? Trafford Park and Elmston.
Well, the appeal site certainly extends from one side of the motorway to the other.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it doesn't fit neatly, you're quite right, it doesn't fit neatly into one or the other. It actually goes across the 2, doesn't it?
Well, the appeal site does. The whole of the appeal site does, yes.
And I think you refer us to the Statement of Common Ground, what is agreed. Paragraph 823, I think, is the paragraph you're drawing our attention to. Page 33. I think that's the paragraph you draw our attention to as to what's
Yes.
agreed, isn't it? And we can see again it's a reference to the appeal site, and we're told whilst the appeal site is not explicitly located in any specific spatial profile area, it sits in between the defined areas of Trafford Park and
Yes.
Elmston. Now, I think what you're trying to tell us is that by in between there, you mean actually there's some undefined area that doesn't fall within either of those spatial profiles which this site sits in. Is that what you're saying?
That's
Mr.
correct.
Fraser, if you'll forgive me,
That's correct.
just give me a moment. Maybe that we've misunderstood, but the language of paragraph 823 telling us, whilst the appeal site is not explicitly located in any specific spatial profile area, seemed to us to be clear, but it may be that since the inspector goes to see it, make its mind, but if that language isn't clear enough, then you better tell us.
Yeah, well, if you'd allow me to
of course.
continue, Mr. Kingston, we might get there.
I hope so.
Good. Are you telling us then, Mr. Singleton, that you thought by agreeing that the area to the east of the M60, which forms part of the appeal site, is not actually within Trafford Park? It's in some unidentified area, spatially, in the core strategy?
I haven't considered that question expressly, but now you put it to me. I would accept that the access road is within the Trafford Park area.
Right.
And I think bounding the motorway there is, as I say, is quite distinct, as we've seen from the profile, the areas map that we looked at. But I do not, if this is the question, I do not accept that the statement that is agreed at paragraph 823 is in any way based on the principle that the access road extends beyond the motorway. Reference to the site here, and it's always been clear in all of our discussion with the council that the main body of the site is to the west of the motorway. The only bit which goes under the motorway to the east is the access road. Yes, it needs to be in the planning application because it isn't an existing access road and it needs permission. But I certainly take this statement in the common ground statement to mean that this is an area which does not sit within either of the profiles, and it is regarding the main body of the site.
Right.
That
so
is my understanding.
823, when it says appeal site, it doesn't mean appeal site. Is that what you're now saying?
Well, it's a shorthand for the appeal site.
Does it mean the appeal site or not?
Well, clearly it's a reference to the appeal site.
Yes. If we go to the plan, back again, site boundary, appendix 4 that we looked at, is that the appeal site or not?
That is the appeal site, but I do not accept that's the meaning of the statement.
Well, I hear that. Now what you're telling us is actually 823 either doesn't mean appeal site when it says appeal site, or isn't correct when it says that the appeal site isn't within any of those areas, as you interpret it to mean, because in actual fact part of the appeal site is within Trafford Park.
That's right, can you pass that?
You are now telling us, aren't you, that part of the appeal site is within Trafford Park, spatially?
Yes.
Thank you. So you're now telling us that the way we are to interpret 823 is either that appeal site doesn't mean appeal site in 823, or if it does mean appeal site, I'm not quite sure what you are telling us to interpret it as. Are you telling us to interpret it as meaning it falls within, part of it falls within Trafford Park and the other part doesn't fall within anything, or what?
Exactly that. The part of it falls within Trafford Park and the other part doesn't fall within it.
Right. So
It's between.
whatever 823 was meant to say, what you're telling us is it's not a plain statement, it requires quite a bit of interpretation.
That is, no, that's my understanding. I think that's been the understanding of the council officers throughout, not just in agreeing with state common ground, but in considering the application throughout its whole process. And I think that is the understanding of Mrs. Harding in the way that she's put it in evidence. That's certainly what I understood.
Well, it may be what you thought you understood it, but you disagree with her then, because in actual fact you'd be saying, oh no, hang on, Mrs. Harding, part of the appeal site's within Trafford Park, wouldn't you?
No, I think the whole reference here, the substantive point of this is where is the main body of the proposal, and it sits on the land to the west.
Yes.
That's a significant part. The access has very little impact or effect on anything other than being access. And I think that is the meaning of the statement.
And if we go back to page 15 of the core strategy, which is what we have to go back to understand what the core strategy is referring to as Ernston, isn't it?
Well, as I say, that is a general description of Ernston as a whole, and I don't disagree with it.
Are you telling us that the core strategy gives us any other description of Ernston that we should turn to look to?
No, I'm saying that's an accurate description of Urmston as a whole, but it's a very, very brief description of a very large and diverse area. And I do read it on the basis that we have a piece of a very significant area here, which actually does not sit within that area, within the profile.
And the spatial profile tells us, we don't need a plan here, because it tells us, doesn't it, that the area it's talking about is bounded by the M60 and the Manchester.
I've said that that's true, but I think this is an area which is very difficult to place, and I think that's why you see more diagrammatic notation in respect to those.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I do understand the point, like Mr. Fraser, and I don't know that you're going to get Mr. Singleton's ship.
Well, I just want to be clear on this, though, Mr. Singleton, so that I can refer to you in my closing submissions. Are you then still maintaining that the wastewater treatment works does not fall within the spatial area of Urmston as described here?
Well, it's referred to as being home. I accept it's within the general area, but I do not think that it fits within the spatial profile. And I don't think it's intended to by officers.
Well, sorry, when you say...
the diagrammatic nature of the plan.
That's
my conclusion.
When you say it's within the area...
Well, it's within the Urmston ward, because the ward boundaries, I think, follow the motorway. And that's no doubt how the council officers have approached this in the first instance.
The area
defining areas.
The area that is covered by this spatial profile, is it within that area or not?
It's within the general area, but I do not accept that it is intended. When we have agreed with the local authority that this sits between, you have my interpretation of that, and I stand by that.
And of course, your position is that the main body of the appeal site, which is what you say we should really be concentrating upon, is that part which is to the west of the M60, where the building and the stack are.
Yes.
So that's within an area that is bounded, isn't it, by the Manchester Ship Canal and the M60?
Yes, as I said, the boundary is correct in terms of the general boundaries of this area, but it is a very general description, and it is not accurate, in my view, in respect to this part of the area.
What, the boundary isn't accurate?
Well, I've described it in my evidence in chief, the boundary between the non-residential and the residential area. And this is an area, it's an area which is on the edge of those two, that has more characteristics of Trafford Park than it does of Urmston.
And what we can also see, if we go back to page 15, is first of all that we're told in the first paragraph, as we've seen, that Urmston is made up of a number of distinct residential neighbourhoods.
Yes.
So their character there is clearly described as being residential.
Yes.
And then we're told in the second paragraph it is predominantly a residential area with Urmston town centre at its heart.
Yes.
That is clearly said in full knowledge of the presence of the wastewater treatment works, because of course they're referred to.
Yes.
So the spatial profile, the assessment of it as being predominantly residential, is unaffected by the presence of the wastewater treatment works, isn't it?
Well, I accept that's an accurate description of the largest part of the Urmston space, placement that's referred to here.
And so if the inspector concludes that the main body of the appeal site to the west of the M60 falls within the area that's covered by this spatial profile, it will fall within a predominantly residential area, according to the spatial profile, won't it?
Well, if you conclude that it's part of the area, then yes, the area will still be predominantly residential. But that isn't my point. My point is that this is a different area which falls between the two spatial profile areas.
Now, at the time of the local authority decision, the development plan comprised the safe policies of the UDP and the regional strategy, didn't it?
Yes.
Sure. And the committee report made reference to the development plan policies and also to emerging development plan policy as I think you drew our attention to earlier this afternoon, didn't we?
Yes.
And if we just turn to that for a moment, I'm just trying to remember, I think it's called document 46. Yeah. Which I very foolishly put away just for... No, now, you undertook an exercise with Mr. Kingston going through the committee report to assess the advice that the officers gave about the weight to give to various policy.
Yes.
I didn't understand you anywhere to criticise the advice given by the officers.
No.
I didn't understand you anywhere to suggest that the officers had failed adequately to deal with this question of weight to be given to policies.
No, I don't argue that.
Thank you. And presumably, you've, in going through that, taken us to all of those passages in the report which you thought were material to advise, or where the officers were advising, I should say, members as to the weight to be given to.
Yes, but that was predominantly in respect to the emerging policy documents that my exercise was concerned with.
And you presumably did it whether it supported your client's case or not.
I didn't have an eye to that at all, correct?
Thank you.
I don't think.
Now, what you did draw our attention to was the consultation response from GMGU,
Yes.
which is, I've numbered it as page 7 on mine. It's not. I haven't got it.
I haven't got numbers. I think it's 7 pages. Page that's headed consultation.
Yeah, it's a page that's headed consultation, and the point you drew our attention to in particular was towards the bottom of the page, the section that deals with policy position, and the point I think you were making was 2 points were made there. One, reference was being made to, in the first paragraph, to the general principles guidance.
Yes.
And whether considerable weight could be given to emerging policy.
Yes.
And secondly, the point in the second paragraph about the waste plan being more up to date than the UDP.
Correct.
And I think you said that the this obviously is a consultation response, so this isn't the this isn't the direct advice from the council's officers. This is simply them recording what other people have said.
Yeah, my comment was it's recorded pretty well in full when you compare the two documents, and it is qualified by the traffic officers.
Yes, that was the next point you made.
Yeah.
The traffic officers don't qualify.
Yeah.
Now, of course, in the consultation response, I think all that the officers set out to do is either to set out precisely what was said by the consultee, or to summarise it. They don't actually comment on the. They don't actually comment on the consultation.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. Where if at all, they make comments, is then when we get to the section that is headed on observations, I think.
I think that's the structure of the report. Yes.
Yeah. The report has a number of sort of subheadings, but it's the first part of the report, principle of development, that really deals with the essential policy.
Are we looking at the observations section?
Yes, the observations section.
Right.
There's a subheading immediately under observations, principle of development. It's that section really that deals with policy in general terms.
Yes, this is the officers' I suppose, assessment of all the consultation responses and other information, and the assessment of the application against the policy.
Now, I mean, I was a little surprised at your suggestion that the officers didn't qualify any statement about the weight to be given to the waste plan, because the paragraph you did draw our attention to is paragraph 19, isn't it? You didn't draw our attention to it, did you? It's a very simple question. You didn't draw.
No, I did not. No.
Although you would be fully aware of it, since I re-examined Mrs. Harding on it.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, ironically, that is about the only paragraph that actually expressly states what weight to give to different policies, isn't it?
I think that's true.
So why was it that of all the paragraphs, the only one that expressly states what weight to give to policies was the one that you didn't refer us to?
I think I must have missed that in the review I carried out yesterday.
Right, I see. But of course it does actually quite significantly qualify what was said by the GMGU, doesn't it?
Well, I think it does. I think actually what it does is to effectively quote the first consultation response from GMGU rather than the second one. So I think from memory that was the words that were used by GMGU in their first response, that it carries some limited weight.
I'm not sure if that's right or not. We can go and look at it if necessary, but I'm not sure
yeah.
where it really takes us, because if we're looking at the advice that the members were being given by the officers, which we know you do not criticise, the advice they were being given by the officers was that the waste plan only had some limited weight at that stage, wasn't it?
That's correct on the basis of that paragraph.
I
don't think it's right, but that's the advice we were given.
Well, you say you don't think it's right now, but of course you've also told us you don't criticise the advice that the officers gave to the members about waste. And the other thing we can bear in mind is that in practical terms, the waste plan and the core strategy at that time were more or less about the same stage, weren't they? They were both had been to examination, and I think both were waiting for. Had the waste plan report actually?
No, I think the core strategy was further advanced. I think the examination had finished, and they had a fairly clear date as to when the report would be submitted. They said December. I think the report they actually received by the end of November.
Well, that might be. It may well be case. It may well be the case because we see it in paragraph 17. That the inspector's report was due to be published in December for the core strategy.
Yeah.
But that would be December 2011, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And we see in paragraph 90.
I'm just trying to remember where the where the waste plan was. Sorry, carry on.
We see in paragraph 19 that we're being told that the waste plan is adoption is anticipated in January 2012.
Yes.
And I must confess it would be a remarkable progress, which I'm sure that Secretary of State would wholeheartedly endorse, to get from inspector's report to adoption within a month, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the position actually, if we go back to the page we were looking at before, the GMGU advised that it was submitted in February of 2011, will be subject to examination in June of 2011.
Yeah.
The core strategy examination, I think, commenced in probably February of 2011 and carried on to September, October because of the various elements.
Yeah,
so in broad terms, they were probably similar.
Well, I thought I was being generous to you actually when I suggested that they were similar, because if we look at paragraphs 17 and 19, the only rational conclusion we could draw from 17 and 19 is that if anything, the waste plan was further on because it was expected adoption in January 2012. Whereas the core strategy was only expected publication of inspector's report in December 2011, wasn't it?
Well, it does say that, but of course the council did adopt it in January, so it doesn't advise here when the core strategy is expected to be adopted.
Council adopted the core strategy in January 2012.
Yeah. So the officers certainly pretty well knew the final form of the core strategy at this stage.
So anyway, I think we're agreed about the same.
I accept they're about the same, in the same broad timescales.
Right. So bearing in mind they're in about the same broad timescales, although we don't actually get told how much weight to attach to the core strategy in paragraph 17, the advice that was given in paragraph 19 about the waste plan would in broad terms again seem to apply to the core strategy at that stage, doesn't it?
That's an inference you draw. I'm not sure that's what. I can't say whether officers intended that at all. They don't address it.
Yeah. And nowhere do the officers suggest to the members in this assessment that the decision should be other than in accordance with the development plan at the time of the decision, do they?
No, they don't. I would just go back to the reference to the core strategy as expressing the most up-to-date expression.
This is right back at the beginning of the report. Yes, by all means, if you want to.
Go back to that. But
yes, you can do.
That was the page 4. The core strategy provides an up-to-date expression of the council's strategic and it is material.
And they tell us it's a material
Yeah.
consideration, but again, they don't actually tell us what weight to
Not
attach.
internally, no.
Yes, what the officers were clearly advising the members was that these other plans, the waste plan and the core strategy, are material considerations you can and should take into account. But other than the statements on weight, which we've just gone through, and I'm not going to go through it again, there's nothing further by way of guidance.
There's not in that committee report, no.
No, thank you. And nothing in the report, as we've agreed, that suggests to the members that they should determine the application other than in accordance with what was the adopted development plan at the time.
Sorry, in the recommendation?
Anywhere in this report. Anywhere.
No, I think that's correct. Obviously, the recommendation was for approval. The report
yes.
doesn't address what should be taken into account if the members are minded to review.
No, and indeed, actually, if we just want to sort of have a look at that, for example, if we go to the page where the recommendation starts, we can see that in the light of making this recommendation, just before the recommendation, paragraph 117, sorry, there's references 117, yeah. There's references there to financial contributions, and they're tied directly to the UDP, aren't they?
Yes, they are. That's the policy basis for the Red Rose Forest and the SPG. Clearly, the SPG can't supplement the core strategy.
Of course, the inspector may actually say to us, that's all very, very interesting as to what the members looked at in November of last year and what they were advised. But of course, again, I think it's common ground between us that this inspector has to form his recommendations on the basis of what the development plan is now.
Yes.
And so he will have to assess this proposal against the relevant policies of the current development.
The current development plan.
And one of those policies, again, I think, which is agreed should be considered, is core strategy policy L6.
L6 is relevant because it's the waste policy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed, just bear with me one moment. Just trying. Sorry to keep shuffling, but I'm trying to pick up some of the points that you made in chief as we go along.
I don't think I made any point about L6.
Well, you did actually, but you didn't know you were making it. Can we turn to CD 15A, please?
Sorry, to
CD 15A.
15A.
Yeah. Which is the supplementary statement of February 2011.
Oh, sorry.
And if we go to page 6 of the supplementary statement, we can see that's where it was certainly, I think, your firm, wasn't it? I'm rather assuming you probably had overall responsibility for it.
Yes, I was overall project director. I can't say I wrote all
I'll put it a different way.
Yes.
I anticipate you're not dissociating yourself from this now, Mr.
No.
Page 6 is where you start addressing policy 10 of the waste. What was it? I think.
Yes.
I think it was probably still the draft waste plan. I think, looking at paragraph 224 when you did it.
Yes. Well, at this time it would have been.
I think it was adopted by this council in April, wasn't it?
This was done in February, so it would be at the point of submission.
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
And Oh, sorry, actually, no, sorry, the wrong year, isn't it? Yes, it's February 2011. Yeah, okay. And in going through this assessment as to compliance with Waste Policy 10, we can see you deal with compliance with the spatial strategy. Then at page 8 you deal with contribution to the waste plan's aims and objectives. And then at page 12 you deal with proposal meets the same assessment criteria as allocated sites.
Yes.
And of course one of the assessment criteria is compliance with core strategy and other local policy. That's correct.
Yes.
And then you tell us that the traffic core strategy is in an advanced stage of production, yet to be adopted, not being subject to independent examination. Policy L6 of the publication version of the core strategy provides the emerging level policy framework and planning for new waste management facilities, and it requires development too. And then you go and set it all out. So you actually were telling us back in February 2011 that come the new development plan, with the waste plan and the core strategy in place, it would be necessary to assess this proposal against policy L6, weren't you?
Yes, what this submission does is to accept that we should address waste policies. We haven't done that in the original application for the reasons that this is an energy proposal rather than a waste proposal. It's acknowledging the response from GMG who are providing that information. That's correct.
Sure. And of course, if one considers policy L6, perhaps we should just take it out in front of us for a moment, so we've got it there. Core document 62, isn't it? L6, I think, starts at page 128. Well, it may not for Mr. Kingston, actually, but I think it does for most of us. And policy L6, we can see it's quite a sort of a compendious policy. You've got quite a bit in it. But if we turn to L6.3, we can see, amongst other things, what we've got to do in determining applications for new waste management facilities. That's correct.
Well, it's a fairly compact policy, really, by comparison to some. But the key criteria are in 16.6.2. And yes, L6.3 says in determining applications, the council will have full regard to.
Yeah. And amongst other things that we are to have full regard to is the environmental, social and economic impacts of development.
Yes.
Including scope for securing long-term benefits and improving the environment, generation of areas in need of investment, and co-location with other employment uses. So one of the things we clearly have to do is look at the economic impacts and effect on regeneration of areas in need of investment. That's correct.
It doesn't say that. It said on, yes, so regeneration of areas in need of investment.
Yeah.
And co-location.
Yeah. Well, I think I read it fairly. I tried to skip out the bits that weren't immediately to do with economic matters and regeneration, but that's what it requires us to look at, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's including the scope for the regeneration of areas in need. I think that follows through. Depends how you interpret that.
Oh, I see. You're trying to qualify regeneration.
Well, I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding correctly. But yes, regeneration of areas in need investment is a consideration.
Right. It's a consideration. And indeed, effectively, that is the very issue, isn't it, that was being raised by the council in its first reason for refusal.
The reason for refusal does refer to areas of need investment.
Now, of course, the first reason for refusal refers specifically, as you pointed out, to WD5 of the
Yes.
UDP. And again, we can go and look at it if you think it's necessary. I'm hoping it isn't for this purpose. WD5 did, again, deal with points about regeneration, albeit not expressed in precisely the same terms as L6. Yeah,
yes.
not expressed in precisely the same terms as L6.3. But clearly, insofar as the council were raising an issue with respect to impact upon regeneration of areas, that issue now falls to be considered under policy L6.3, doesn't it, of the current development?
Well, it's one of the issues.
Okay. And so, whilst it's not drafted in identical terms, that effectively carries forward the issue of concern that was previously identified in policy WD5 in the UDP, doesn't it?
Well, that may be the case. My point in rebuttal is if that was the case and the council felt that there was a conflict with this policy, it had every opportunity to express that in the decision note. In the decision note.
Yeah, well, I hear your criticism of the council on that, Mr. Singleton. But the truth of the matter is this, isn't it? That in the real world, what the Inspector and the Secretary of State have got to do is, first of all, assess the proposal against the current development plan, as we have agreed. And secondly, look at the substance of the matter and what the real issue is against the development plan policy, rather than spending a long time with what might be thought to be somewhat forensic analysis as to what was or was not the drafting of a particular reason for refusal.
Well, I wouldn't regard that as forensic analysis. I would regard it as fairly substantial information for the inspector to know the basis on which the application was refused and what the council's case is, which is why we have the Rule 6 statement, and there is no reference to any conflict with core strategy in the Rule 6 statement. That conflict has only been introduced in the inquiry itself.
Yeah.
And even then it's not clear the conflict is the information.
Right, well, there we go. And just whilst we've got policy L6 in front of us, Mr. Singleton, if we go back to L6.2, we can see that there are 4 different subparagraphs there,
Yes.
which the council will. And the second one is require all developers of new waste management facilities within the borough to demonstrate the proposal's consistency with the principles of the waste hierarchy.
Yes.
Now, of course, it's now for the Inspector and the Secretary of State to determine this application. But in applying the policy, they effectively stand then, or now, in the shoes of the council, don't they? In applying the policy...
In applying that part about it?
Yes, in applying that part of the policy, where it says the council will require all developers to...
Yes.
It's now effectively, the decision maker is now the Secretary of State. If he's going, he can decide, I'm not going to apply the policy, but if he's going to apply the policy, he would require you to do that, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I accept that correctly.
And of course, the agreed position in the Statement of Common Ground is that the compliance with this policy was something that needed to be considered at the inquiry, wasn't it?
You'll have to take me to a paragraph.
Paragraph 841.
Yes, that's correct.
Sure. Now again, with respect to the waste plan, I think it's accepted that this proposal falls to be considered now in accordance with Policy 10.
Yes.
And that requires, and indeed I think we saw it a moment ago when the draft policy was looked at by your firm, that requires assessment against amongst other things, the spatial strategy and the waste plan.
Yes.
And also assessment against the assessment criteria for allocated sites.
Yes, it does.
And again, I think there's no issue between you and Mrs. Harding on that. That effectively then takes us back, it's a slightly circuitous route perhaps, but that then takes us back to policy 4 of the waste plan, to the assessment criteria.
In respect to the assessment criteria, yes, I'm not sure the rest of the policy is.
Yeah, I know. It may well be it could be drafted in a more straightforward way, but and that requires us to see whether the proposal meets other requirements of the waste plan. If we go back to the assessment criteria, that's what they say.
Yes.
And again requires us, or requires, I should say, compliance with the waste hierarchy.
Yes, it does.
And also requires consideration of policy L8. Sorry, waste plan policy L8, not L8. Waste plan policy 8.
Well, I think policy 8 comes into play anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah, right. Well, whether it comes into play anyway or not, we're reading it.
That point was made by GMGU in their response, and we responded to it.
Okay, and again, compliance, it's agreed that compliance with policy 10 is a matter to be considered at the inquiry, isn't it?
Yes.
Yep. And your position, as I understand it, is that the site has potential to provide combined heat and power.
Indeed.
But no certainty that it will be provided.
Well, I think it has a very strong potential. There isn't any certainty. I wouldn't expect to see any certainty at this stage.
Can we just bear with me? I want to make sure my reference is right. Yes, if we go back to CD 15A again, please, which you were drawing our attention to before. Which is the February 2011 supporting statement that we're working on. Oh, sorry, supplementary statement.
Yes.
Page 16 of that, you again is where you or your firm assess what was then draft policy 8.
Yes.
And first of all, we can see that policy 8 there is, or policy 8 is described in paragraph 266. Policy 8 is described in paragraph 266, isn't it?
Yes.
That's your understanding, or your firm's understanding of what Policy 8 provides.
Well, that's the summary, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Look at the policy.
And we can see that, as summarised there, what it says is it requires applications for waste management facilities which have the potential to utilise energy from waste will be required to provide CHP unless it can be demonstrated this would prevent the development of waste management facilities that have the potential to deliver important waste infrastructure. That's right.
Yes.
And I think that is a first summary, if it's necessary to turn to Policy 8, that is the first summary of what it actually does provide, isn't it?
Well, I'm just going to check that.
Okay, it's page 69 of CD 65.
Yes, that's accurate summary.
Yeah. So certainly, as being summarised by your firm at that time, Policy 8 wasn't seen as something as a policy that simply required you to demonstrate potential. It actually required you to provide it unless you could demonstrate it wasn't effectively practical for the reasons set out there, didn't it?
That's the way that the policy is worded, because the submission, the response that we made to the authority, they were satisfied with the response that we gave.
Yeah. But I don't understand you to say you're putting any evidence here that providing CHP would prevent the development of waste management facilities that have the potential to deliver important waste infrastructure, do you?
That's not
No,
part
it's
of
not your
it.
case. Right. So, as drafted, the policy seems to require you to provide it, doesn't it? If you're to comply with the policy.
Well, on the face of it, yes, that's what it says, but you have to look at that in the sense of the practical application of the policy. But I suspect there are very, very few proposals that could demonstrate that they can provide it at the application stage for all the reasons that have been discussed.
Well, there we go. Now, what you say or what your firm say in 268 is, perhaps I should be in 267 as well, just to be fair. As set out above, the proposed development of primary functions and energy plant. Part of the plant's fuel making the waste, making the development of waste co-incinerator. However, as the principal function of the facility is not to manage waste, it's not considered necessary to demonstrate compliance with the policy. So you were making that point that you didn't think you needed to comply with. Notwithstanding this, it is Peel Energy's aspiration to capture the heat generated through the energy production process for local use. So again, we can see that aspiration, that's back to, it's your hope because of the potential effectively. That's what's being said.
Yes, I think it's fair to say it's our hope and expectation as well.
Well, let's just see about that. Peel Energy have commissioned a study to evaluate potential heat receptors in the vicinity of the REP and the practicalities of supplying heat to these receptors. This study isn't completed yet, but it has identified a number of potential receptors. However, initial feedback from the study concludes that supplying potential receptors would require significant investment. A return on this investment would be dependent on the delivery and support of the renewable heat incentive, over which there is currently uncertainty. Once the renewable heat incentive is clarified, it would enable Peel Energy to make an investment decision on heat utilisation. Now, first, no suggestion that you wouldn't be able to produce the information at some point in the future because of commercial confidentiality, was there?
It isn't in that report, but I understand it was conveyed to officers at that time. But the report would not be made.
Well, I must confess, I haven't seen anywhere in the documentation where that's said.
I accept it's not in that documentation, not in that paragraph.
Secondly, what it's actually saying is it's going to cost a lot of money to do this.
Well, that was based on the initial findings of the study.
Significant investment. And quite frankly, we're not going to do it unless we're subsidised, is what it's saying, because of renewable heat incentive, isn't it?
My understanding of what that is saying is based on the initial findings of the study, and I didn't do the study, so I'm not responsible for the study, but the initial findings suggested yes, there will be a significant investment, and that may require RA time. My understanding is we later advised the authority that the study had demonstrated that there were potential receptors and there was a good probability.
Well, hang on a minute. Where's the evidence to show that it would no longer require significant investment?
I would have to go back and check the documentation.
Because I must confess, my suspicion would be that if it required significant investment 2 years ago, it will still require significant investment.
Well, I can't comment on that because the report has been completed. You've asked questions of Mr. Offenhofen about the report and what that concludes. And my understanding is it concludes there is a good potential.
Well, without seeing this report, which, of course, even if it had commercially confidential parts in it, it's always possible to blank out the figures. So without seeing this report, Mr. Singleton, it's impossible for us to know what it says.
I'm not sure it is possible in this case because there are only a limited number of potential major users of the heat within a reasonable distance of the site, and I think it would be fairly obvious to anybody looking at that report which potential companies are being referred to, and as that report deals with gives information about their own investment plans, clearly that would be commercially confidential information.
It's interesting, Mr. Singleton. It's also surprising just how many times when people want to divulge information, they can draft a report in a way that doesn't cause embarrassment, isn't it?
Sorry, interesting.
How many times when parties want to divulge information, they can draft a report so it doesn't cause commercial embarrassment?
No, I think there is a difference here between a report which has information which is commercially sensitive to appeal and a report which has information which is commercially sensitive to third parties whom you are trying to negotiate with about the potential use of the heat.
Okay, well, I mean, it isn't before us, and it doesn't sound as if it's going to be put before us.
But that is the reason, as I understand it, why it is confidential. It is not because of Peel's own investments, it's because of third parties, and quite clearly you would not want to put that information into the public domain.
Could you help us with what's happened to the renewable heat incentive?
That I can't control.
Because in actual fact, what a fair reading of this paragraph would tell us is that as of February 2011, there was uncertainty as far as people were concerned as to whether or not they would be providing
I
CHP, wasn't it?
I accept that what this is paragraph says, but that was based on the initial feedback from the studies, and that's the qualification I would put on it. That's clearly what that paragraph is meant to convey.
Yeah. Okay, it's nearly 5 o'clock, Mr. Fraser,
Oh,
so we
right,
could break when it, if there's a convenient point.
Well, I'm happy. Yeah, that's probably quite a convenient point.
Is that okay?
Yes, it is indeed.
Yeah, okay. So,
I'm happy with that.
is that all right? Yeah, all right.
We'll unlikely to fall almost on the hour, but there we go.
Okay. We will adjourn until tomorrow morning then at 9:30. I'll have to ask you to keep away from your team, Mr. Singleton.
Yes, sir, of course.
May or may not be a benefit. I don't know.
More for Mr. Singleton,
It is distinct benefit. Whether my wife thinks so, or I home in daylight hours, she's not used to seeing me, but let's hope for the best.
Okay. I'm hoping. Well, I'm sure we can complete hearing your evidence and re-examination tomorrow. Any indication of
we've got quite a way to go. I think
got a way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said 4 hours, and
yeah.
I'm certainly not any less than that.
Okay, and re-examination, Mr. Kingston, we going to?
Rather depends on the questions the witnesses ask and how
they're asked.
So far we've accumulated a bit on the basis of simply what the council's case is as opposed to what it thinks the Secretary of State's case should be. But
I appreciate it. Mr. Cummington.
Again, it depends on the questions the council
yeah.
asked. I'm not going to. I have a cross-examination, but as with the previous one, as the council asks questions, I tick them off and don't revisit them.
Yeah.
So
okay. Well, as we've got the public meeting or the public session at 6:30 tomorrow, I would appreciate if we can finish a little early. But
we're always. Most of us are doing a lot of work outside the inquiry as well. So.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, but we'll have to see how it goes. But I mean, I think we should be on course anyway to complete this case tomorrow. If not, well, we're down for closings on Tuesday, but Wednesday's always been a day that we could utilise, so we might have to go with it. Okay. Thanks. 9:30 tomorrow. Thank you.